As we continue on from last time's space-based route split, Char meets with the leaders of the Venus Globe attackers from last time, him apologizing for his role in the Universal Century becoming so dysfunctional that it led to the Straits and Guild, only for the Venus Globe representatives to insult him for it. That it's arrogant to presume he could have done anything to affect that. Would you stop ridiculing Char for every single fucking thing he does? It is not sheer arrogance. It's factual, as long as one wants to blame him for what went wrong, which everyone else keeps fucking doing, and he himself has just consigned himself to plainly agreeing with them, as he was one of the leaders of the era where things could have been changed. And he has been doing so, as no one from the guild has told him that the plan to drop the Axis asteroid on Earth fails to make him believe otherwise. Thus, he is operating for the belief that it succeeded, and the need to abandon Earth because of it was what caused the circumstances of Guild. He's wrong, but you don't insult him for that. You correct the misconception, which none of them are! As I've inferred earlier, this is a constant criticism I have of the Super Robot Wars games. That they both acknowledge that Char was right in the actions he took and had no other means to do anything to affect the change that needed to happen due to his isolation, yet he's constantly railroaded, condemned, and put in the wrong by default by the series writers, even when the presence of the crossover material would then provide those alternatives, and by other means making the prior actions unnecessary, and a character would constantly not perform them. This ties back to Amuro and Tobia rejecting Char out of hand when Char was legitimately trying to do the right thing earlier. That exists for the sole purpose of keeping them at odds, which is not a detriment to Char's character, but Amuro's, as Char is continuously looking for better options than the ones he has to resort to, including diplomatic ones. Yet Amuro rejects the need for them to do anything despite their intervention being required. Zex and Lelouch, who made similar decisions to Char, frequently have most of their actions justified both inside and out of their series. Yet it's just Char that's constantly ridiculed for them, despite the same circumstances being born around all of them, and how the narrative of the game exploits him. Like, if you want the irredeemably evil Char clone, you've got Raoul Le Creuset from Gundam Seed, who was deliberately written to be an omnicidal psychopathic nihilist, deliberately playing both sides against the other so they would all reach the point of mutually assured destruction. But canon Char? No, there's a reason I describe his counterattack self as inexplicably evil, as the story bends over backwards to the point of breaking to make him the villain in the face of the tyranny that actually makes the timeline a hellhole. Thus, my issue with Super Robot Wars is they want to use him, but they don't know how to use him without tripping over the problem of him being unjustly vilified, with them putting him on the sides of those he would normally oppose, as they keep doing it. And that is the case here, where Char is disgusted by the conduct of the sheer inhumanity of those he's been left with as allies, who have all lost touch with the humanity as they act as the extremist elites, in the same way that Char chose those same types of people to be his enemies before. And yet he can't do anything to oppose them now, because everyone who would have been his ally has abandoned him or shrugged him off. This doesn't look bad for Char. This looks bad for every protagonist character that should have been his ally and yet rejected him. As thanks to the heroes, he's once again been left with no options and abandoned by those that could turn things into a more beneficial direction, until they come back to berate him for a situation they themselves caused. The most central in that, to me, being Glemmy fucking Toto, who, for those who haven't seen Double Zeta, is the true villain of the story, as he uses the excuse of wanting to return the Zabi family to power as why he rebels against Haman Karn, who, while she did take control of Neo Zeon in her own way, did so to give the last surviving Zabi family member, Mineva, her own life by taking the weight of their campaign off the young girl's shoulders. So Glemmy in turn, in reality, was doing it all to put himself in power, and abused many, many, many people to make that happen. And yet, he's here, and Haman isn't. Like, not every antagonist in UC Gundam is a better person than the story gives them credit for. And Glemmy is one of them. In fact, he is one of the fucking worst you could possibly make into a recruitable character. And worst of them all being Kumpo, who again is the one that even started G-reco's war, through just the act of putting war machines back into people's hands. But as I condemned earlier, war does not happen for the sake of war. It happens when irreconcilable differences boil over to the point where there is no other option but for war to happen. War itself doesn't strengthen anyone as Kumpo insists it does. It is a failure of a modern system to address inequalities between peoples, with usually the leadership of one side or the other being complete assholes. Or one person being so selfish that he takes from others what does not belong to them. Like, there are certainly others, such as generational trauma that Iron-Blooded Orphans and G-Witch played with, but when Gundam just has its themes boiled down to, war is bad, you miss the actual reasons why war is bad, and the horrible things that make such come about, and that is not a positive for the franchise overall. Again, it's why I prefer the AU Timeline series. They better address these things without scapegoating a cause while ignoring the true source of them. But there's a reason I brought up the Char scene from the Zeta Gundam video game a few videos ago, as the SRW games treat that whole mess as canon. That it's Camille that is repeatedly made into the means of talking Char down from paths that the man already disagrees with. The problem with how this is always utilized is Char is not the one that puts stock in blind faith and optimism, and usually the loudest voices condemning him have likewise put no thought into the issues that Char is endeavoring to find a solution to. Thus, Camille's recovery and well-being should not be the sticking point to quote-unquote redeeming Char from a darker path by giving him new hope, as that could have been done by not treating him like garbage from the start, since he was first presented in this game as agreeing with the position the Twilight Knights were taking to end the conflict and get everyone home, just from the perspective of him seeking to first protect the factions made up of the peoples he felt he most failed. So he's consigned himself to this path he hates, simply because he was robbed of all others by the heroes of this era. This battle is further complicated by the appearance of Peru 2 to counter the original LPO Peru, and Peru 2 has been re-brainwashed by Glemmy. So, fucking fantastic for that. And as happens in the few of the SRW games, we have to save the Peru clones from their key abuser. This once more requiring the specific use of the Persuade command by Peru and Judao on Peru 2. It's certainly the better part of this stage, as like the majority of the space routes in this game, the rest of this is all garbage. Playing fast and loose with Char's motivations to try and place blame for others' actions on himself, which he didn't do before, saying he enabled Kumpo's actions, which he didn't, and then he wants to kill Camille to harden his resolve, which he doesn't. And also saying that it's Char's own ego that's the problem, when that is once again Ambro's own projection onto him.
You're incapable of that level of incompetence, Mr. LaForge.
Regardless, Char is made to be talked down with the form of condensation that I hate about the bad entries in this series that ignore the real problems in a given setting, leading to the actual antagonists taking charge of assaulting us, including Glemmy Toto, as they all plan to backstab Char from the start as a relic of the past, which Char, if he was being characterized properly, would have seen coming from these absolutely transparent scumbags. Though even then, Char's new allies among the UC crew will not stop treating him like shit. The space group returns to Alworth, I'd asking a lot of questions of Char in the interim to try and understand his perspective, while Bellri just butts in and says it takes a long time for people to change. It really doesn't. People can change very fluidly throughout their lives as long as they are open to new possibilities. What prevents societal change on a grander scale than just the person is rigid oppressive structures that prevent the oblivious from becoming aware of injustices that can end up affecting them, which makes them believe that's just the way things are, instead of accept that this is deliberately being done to them. And that is not a natural system. That is the system that keeps needing to be torn down to actually fix things. Once again, real-life examples of that. Both the civil rights movement and the multi-generational attempts by conservatives to roll back the rights granted by the civil rights movement because they want control over other people's autonomy. Hell, society has continuously changed year over year, era over era. There is not at any point where we have stopped changing for good or for bad. It is just, again, people putting up roadblocks to change that's try and slow that down. So the sheer sociocultural stagnation that is present in both the Universal and Reguild Century actually is anathema to human existence. And that's not even getting to how, thanks to the revelations in Gundam Unicorn, that the Federation government Char was fighting against was illegitimate to begin with. So once again, Bellri is talking out of his ass. And it's not like Char wants perfection as Bellri wrongly claims. It was from the start about freedom from tyrannical powers that ruin others' lives, and it forces that abnormal stagnation and the perpetuation of self-destructive cycles. For those who actually remember what Zionism is before the Zabi family got to it, Zionist ideals were just about accepting the lots in life they have in space and best changing to suit their new environment, to no longer be held back by Earth and working to free themselves of tyrannical rule. This is not something that should be difficult, and yet it keeps being held to be so for another reason than other people's arrogance other than Char's. But of course, all of this nonsense is based around Taminoisms that ignore the real causes of conflict, which just say it's people, when no, there is always an external cause. And I hate that the game frames Bellri as being in the right, despite how he's deliberately being written to put words in other people's mouths. That's not how you frame a character as being right, as it's making so the debate has a foregone conclusion and cannot be refuted before it's even spoken, even when it easily can. This last stage is more of a filler stage for the space side than anything, permitting Tobia to be upgraded to his X1 full cloth crossbone Gundam, Ida's G-Arcane to get some new skills, and later in the stage for Bellri to deploy the G-Self with its perfect pack equipment, and in doing so unlock his status as the Reguild Century's new type, to show that once again, Tamino was too super focused on Psychic Superman and G-Reco to really understand the fundamental hypocrisy of new type psychic powers that is supposed to commune with and understand the thoughts of others, but all refuse to understand others' points of view, and instead substitute in their own to condemn any others they don't agree with or do things their way, but may have still been valid. To reiterate the condemnation of new types from Gundam X,
ニュータイプは未来を作らないのか。
そうだ。それと同時に過去にしがみつきそれを利用することしか考えなかった者にも未来は作れない。
私にとってニュータイプとは信じるべきものなのだ。今になって否定しろと言われてもそれは不可能だ。
君自身がそれに陥っている限り、スペースノイドにも未来はない。たとえどんな未来が見えたとしても、それを現実のものとしようとしない限り、それは手には入らないのだから。
行かないでくれ。ニュータイプがなければ我らはどうなる。おやめください。そんなものはなかったんですよ。
Please watch Gundam X. It really did not deserve to be screwed over so badly by its producer and the network it ran on. And yes, those are the actual two reasons why it was cut short. Both of them made the viewership drop like a stone, when beforehand it was much better than it was claimed to be. There's also a story event at this stage regarding the Keepers of Order, but it's repeated on the ground team route, so I'll save it for now. On the opposing side of the route split, we're more focused on the Watcheru content for a bit. Tora, impressed by the Twilight Knight's strength, thus is becoming a fan. So Don Goro has to intervene to prove to the Prince of Darkness the power of their regime. So while Tora sneaks away to play with the kids among the knights, which the older members catch sight of, and Lush determines rightfully that Tora is part of their forces, but Cece decides to be snide about that possibility. Yet to reiterate, I have no idea why Code Geass fans like her beyond the actress she is voiced by. Even in these games, she does not in any way positively contribute. Now, Callan is supportive of the possibility that Lelouch is right and they have to keep an eye on Toro, and possibly give him reasons to switch to the Knight side, since he is just a little kid. Spoilers, Toro is recruitable, Lelouch's suspicions are justified, and the manner of approaching him that Callan proposes is eventually proven to be the correct one. Cece legitimately does nothing but be a bitch. Joe is also here, wanting a fair duel from Maito, and could only hope to get one by sneaking away from the Dwokdar-related alliances, due to Purple wanting to constantly fight dirty whenever Maito's involved. None of that being something Joe wants. Speaking of, Purple launches an attack on them, which only harms their side in the long term, as Wataru acting to protect Toro from the attack teaches the stunted youth about the concept of friendship, but also that Wataru is as sworn enemy as the Dragon Savior! Anyways, that is where things break in the short term, Dongoro coming in at this point and destroying the allied mechs of Wataru's supporting characters. And Wataru himself is only not wrecked thanks to Toro intervening to repay the earlier act, but in doing so announces himself as Wataru's enemy, and he will be the one among all of Dwokdar's army to defeat Wataru, just so he can be strong like his father. Yeah, generational trauma's a bitch. So it's Joe, now in his Goryu proper, Goro, Toro, and their cannon fodder in this stage. The three enemies together all viewing power and strength as everything else has failed them. Wataru of course takes on Toro to see if he can't talk him down, which doesn't work yet. But Wataru gets back up from the returning Kurama in his Kurao Maru mech, and Wataru's companions get their upgrade mechs, Sen-O Maru and Geno Maru, from this event as well. Hell, upgrades for everyone! For as Joe ridicules Wataru's resolve as someone bitter against such righteousness due to the losses he suffered, Gain returns to the picture, and he and Maito once more combine into Great Might Gain, pushing back against that sort of nihilism, even getting Joe to agree that if Maito can show the strength of justice, he'll back down and join the Knights. Well, Maito wins, but before Joe can acknowledge such, Purple pulls another sneak attack on them, Joe taking the shots meant for Maito, Purple revealing he even tried to tamper with their match without others knowing, as he was able to channel some of the power of darkness into the Goryu to make it stronger. But Joe rejected that gift, making Joe out to be as insolent as Joe's father, which is the reason why Joe even went to the dark-ish side to begin with. Of course, since so much of this played out in adaptation in V, I'm just skipping along it. But the bottom line was Joe was obliviously working by proxy for the man who killed his father, the Black Diamond League's leader, Xev. But in X, he doesn't know that yet. And now that he's in active conflict with them, he's gonna go off and figure out how to actually redeem himself before we get him as a permanent recruit. But hey, settling things with Joe for the moment shows to Wataru that he can help Toro as well. It just takes some perseverance and time, and removing a literally controlling parent from his ability to poison the children into tainted worldviews. Though in the wrap-up discussion with Sparrow, there is something the magical bird has to ask Black Gain. Since Black Might Gain is based upon Gain's equipment, and they now saw Might Gain and Might Kaiser combined into a single unit, could Black Gain use Maito's Kaiser machines to become Great Black Might Gain? And the answer is yes! This is the Shokugan modeling project model kits for Might Gain that released in 2023, and the Might Kaiser they released as part of that is cross-compatible with Black Gain, albeit with some of the cheat parts they included to get the aesthetic right for the animation model, just not being right to match Black Gain. But it's a minor complaint since you can just not use them. I do not have a Playmo addiction, building things is how I relax. Now of course Black Gain says it can't be done as it's more a matter of interpersonal bonds that makes it work so effectively. But considering how much of Black's AI is literally a copy-paste of Gain's, it's not a great excuse. But it works well enough for why the Super Robot Wars games would never showcase that sort of part swap. Especially since in Might Gain canon, Black Gain was a character that died in the same episode in which they first appeared. But unfortunately the good times can't keep rolling, as the story swings back to the Nadia-related content, with Nemo calling everyone to the hangar to actually explain himself. Nadia asking what possible authority he could have to call everyone there. He's the fucking captain of the ship you're on! I genuinely do not understand who would find this character appealing. Hell, even the Cross-Ange cast get in on lambasting her for her behavior this time. But they have mostly explicable reasons for their inter-character conflicts. While Nadia holds a grudge against anyone that won't do things explicitly her way, just like a spoiled brat. A spoiled brat that shouldn't exist as part of Nadia's character due to the life she's had to live. And yet that's how she canonically is. Nemo actually asked them all down here to ask them if they could leave the ship temporarily as they have a personal matter to deal with. Nemo intending to immediately come back after it's handled. But Lelouch and Walter are both in the front of asking why they can't just help. It's what Nemo's been doing for them, so they could easily just return the favor. But the issue is it involves Nemo's history with Gargoyle, and in return to one place in specific.
It's the fabled lost city of Atlanta!
Howdy, yo!
The entire place is, of course, one massive graveyard, destroyed after the energy inside a structure known as the Tower of Babel went critical. The survivors transporting the device here before abandoning the city so it could never be used again, and moving themselves to settlements on the land. I hate this reference made here for numerous reasons, once again sourced from the original series, because the Tower of Babel was literally a tower built in the city of Babel, and has no relation at all to Atlantean mythology. That was a real place, also known as Babylon, in the Greek translation of the name, while Babel originates from the Hebrew one. It was located 50 miles south of Baghdad, Iraq. There are still ruins there, and among them is the base of a giant ziggurat named Etemenanki. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That was dedicated to the Mesopotamian sun god Marduk, son of Utu, whose destruction was caused by a siege in 689 BCE by the Assyrian king, I'm again going to screw this up, Sennacherib, and was in the process of being rebuilt when Alexander the Great conquered the region. Whereas Atlantis originates as a fictional antagonist in Plato's work Timaeus and Critias, that were written around 300 years later, and was said to be an island nation beyond the boundaries of the Athenian Empire of the Mediterranean Sea, ergo why the ocean beyond that sea became known as the Atlantic Ocean. Babylon and its tower, however, are given a mythological remake in Judeo-Christian religious texts, as in those books, the raising of that tower arrogantly to a false god that wasn't the biblical god is what destroyed human unity by distortion of languages. In reality, scholars have found that the Babylonian word Bab-Ilu, meaning gate of God, that was used to describe the temple, is phonologically similar to the Hebrew word Balal, meaning confused or confounded, which is often considered where the name Babel originates. So while the Judeo-Christian Bible ascribes to God in causing the fall of human unity out of arrogance, it is actually a parable for a real-world event, that being the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and Babylon the focus of that parallel because Babylon, during the rule of Hammurabi, was made the capital city of the empire due to its role as an administrative town through which all management of and orders throughout the empire were given, Hammurabi consequently raising its status to a holy city due to both its role and the temple placed there. But the city had no natural means of defense, so when Hammurabi died, the unity he brought as the empire's leader was lost. And the empire crumbled when the city fell, because all its administrative duties could not be taken up by any of the remaining regions, which thus fractured the second great empire of the world, as the arrogance of the people, when put in context, is about putting too much power and importance on one place, that no other is capable of functioning without it, and them being completely incapable of guarding it. Now, I don't take issue with stories making use of the mythological parable that humanity was cursed with diverse languages that made it difficult to understand each other, as other series have used such. Case in point, Symphogear. Despite the natural evolution and diversification of dialects, having done that all on their own, due to the long periods in human history where cultures were cut off from one another. But I have a bigger issue with stories that try and claim, no, the Tower of Babel was something in somewhere else. As, while the mythological view also takes the historical perspective out of context, it is not saying it was something else entirely. And this wasn't based on the Jules Verne books either. This was completely Gainax and Miyazaki on that. Despite, again, Babel Tower having nothing to do with Atlantis' mythology. And yes, Nadia does treat this as the actual original tower, which is the problem. You can use it for things relating to human unity and language, but when you go into the range of, it was a weapon the people knew not how to control, and go back to Miyazaki's will of all science and technology is evil as we're too stupid to understand its dangers, it's more likely to irritate me, as so much of our history is us doing stupid things because we didn't have the science and knowledge at the time to understand why something may have been bad. Which contradicts Miyazaki's stories insisting that the pursuit of advancement makes us idiots because it causes the world's problems, when the problems of the world are overwhelmingly caused by individuals with wealth and power resisting progress, even when that progress is made for less harmful means. The SRW-X amalgamation of the story takes things further, and then after the Tower of Babel reactor went critical, the survivors transported Atlantis' ruins to Alworth, because they can do that. Them being the Seekers of Paradise in Alworth's creation myth, and in gratitude for the dragon gods taking pity on them, they allied with them in fighting the varied forces of darkness. That's why Nemo's been helping Watru and also been on Arsenal's good side. With the survivors of Atlantis building a new settlement on Alworth until 10 years previously, when Gargoyle's machinations destroyed the survivor civilization by overloading another of their Tower of Babel reactors which warped their forces, Nemo's group, and Nadia to the world of peace. With Gargoyle and Nemo trying to find ways back ever since due to them no longer having the means themselves of freely transporting back and forth. It only being thanks to the Keeper's schemes to feed End that they got back here at all. Thus Nemo brought his crew here as it was far past the point they properly mourned for those they lost a decade ago, and also to get repair parts for the N Nautilus, which hadn't been operating at full capabilities yet. But unfortunately Nemo was followed here, leading to an extended confrontation with Gargoyle, and since they're one of the factions allied with Mitsurugi, Stupid Hair supplied them with mass production paramails to boost their forces. Which I don't think he could actually do before. Though as they're repelled, Nemo decides to increase the power of the seal on this place so no one may ever enter it again, leading to Nemo taking Nadia to see a literal fucking space whale, because he doesn't want to tell Nadia himself that she is his daughter, and wants the space whale to do it instead, as at this point Nadia does not fucking listen to a single thing he or anyone else says, so would more likely than not call him a liar and refuse to listen any further. Okay, let's be fair. The space whale is actually here as part of the human suck crap, where the higher being is amused by the contradiction of humans loving peace but blindly entering war, which ignores the actual origins of why conflict begins. That is an outright straw argument and oversimplification. I hate that shit, as it dismisses the actual suffering of people as trivial. But its actual point is to try and tell Nadia to not judge people from preconceived false notions, which you would think is a condemnation of her horrible attitudes towards others to make her reconsider them, as it's an animal telling her she's being awful, but she never stops. She acts as dismissive to that advice as she does everything else that doesn't fit her worldview. And that's in the original series as well. So like a lot of content of Nadia, it's fucking pointless. On Gargoyle's flagship, he plots with Stupid Hair as him invading Atlantis. It was for the same reason Nemo did, to get repair parts for their super weapon, named the Ark. Yeah, in Nadia, the people of Atlantis are actually aliens that migrated to Earth after a completely different civilization-destroying calamity. What that was, they don't get into, but considering Evangelion was originally written with intention for it to be an in-universe sequel to Nadia, it was probably the entities Eva would later name Angels malfunctioning and trying to overwrite whatever worlds they occupied with new life forms. As if you're aware of the Evangelion Apocrypha material, you will be aware that Evangelion's central conflict is caused by Earth becoming occupied by two extraterrestrial biological terraforming devices meant to seed life to planets, which were not designed to be able to co-inhabit the same one. And Evangelion's antagonists activated the opposite one, while hindering the one they were born from being able to counteract them, as they viewed them as being artifacts that could grant them the power of gods by unifying humanity in a single form they would control. Obviously, we're not dealing with Evangelion here. It likely would have been smarter in that context had Nadia been included alongside a game featuring Eva, but that's not the issue here. The issue is, if Atlantis and all its relics originated from the world of peace in this timeline, and the Ark was completely non-functional, it wouldn't have been transported to Alworth alongside everything else. So, how did it get here? Moreover, in this version of the story, it's made clear that Stupid Hair corrupted Gargoyle into turning on his people, and that's not a change I like, as it obfuscates the fact that Gargoyle was adopted into the Atlantean survivor civilization to begin with, which admittedly isn't possible in the same way it was in the sourced series, due to the series amalgamation separating the civilization from normal humanity to begin with. But when a story's entire thematic point is specifically about wisdom to use the advancements of science responsibly, it muddies the purpose to change the entire reason why Gargoyle was deemed as unwise. I hate that reason in the canon Nadia story and view it as bullshit, but X disregarding it for the most part is a poor change because Gargoyle is being contrasted against Embryo, who is a man-child with a god complex so full of himself he literally can't get off unless the one he's screwing willingly become his sex slaves. And yet they both have, well, had, a common element to them, in that their own egos blind them to their faults and how generally bad they are at their purported goals. Stupid Hair incapable of making his own designer humans to the specifications he intended of them, and Gargoyle being completely incapable of using Atlantean technology himself because it is gene-locked to those of Atlantean descent, which he is not. What they want are the things they most cannot have, due to the respective shortcomings of the characters, and their opponents being aware of that is their respective berserk buttons. Also, that the technology is gene-locked because Atlanteans are aliens thing, yeah, that is why Gynax actually had a better chance of suing MGM over Stargate's Atlantis than they would have over Disney's The Lost Empire, if they had even owned enough of the IP rights to even consider a lawsuit. It still would have failed, as those details are only the start of what is done with the series, but it had more of the details in common than just a general description of a plot arc. Hell, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin actually had a better chance of suing Disney than Gynax did as well, considering The Lost Empire shares not just a plot arc in common with the original Stargate film, but characterization, situation, and dialogue similarities. Anyways, the Nautilus heads back to Arsenal Island as we've hit another major story flag for their series, and one long delayed, to the point that to compensate for it, Hilda and Tusk are actively fighting over Anja's affections now out of completely fucking nowhere. Because damn it, everything is bi about this. I mean, it's nice to see Anja's little harem forming earlier, but as I said several videos ago, this would have been better justified had Hilda been Anja's constant companion to better showcase the shift to affection. Here, it's because they're consolidating the plot because they need to turn Ursha, Chris, and Salia into enemies to get the other Ragnamales in play. And they don't have the time to do the Anja and Tusk banished to another world to do those developments off-screen part of the story. Hell, part of the problem of X is, since Cross Anja's story is used so much as a vehicle to facilitate other content that is not its own, the depiction of Anja's story as consequence is waylaid to a harmful degree. So much so that I have not seen this in any other SRW game to date. So the supporting cast members basically get nothing to do by which to even allow them to have a character. Ursha being the mother role of Salia's team, only now being exemplared by her being a surrogate mom to the other abandoned Norma. Or Chris being repeatedly mistreated as Rosalie's doormat. Or Salia's one-sided infatuation with their boss Jill, leaving her unfulfilled. All three of these are the contingent storylines they had, which explained their fall into serving Stupid Hair, despite them being the one that screwed them over to begin with. But none of that has been depicted as part of X's story previously. So only introducing that now makes their personal motivations that led them astray come off as unimportant and petty, as opposed to something that had been showcased from their introduction or seeded beforehand. Something which the original series and V both did. And not helped at all due to the means by which Embryo first makes contact with them, being as a tempting devil poking at an insecurity which flies in contradiction to his entire modus operandi of framing himself as a god. There is, after all, a reason he set in motion the events that led his nations to attack Arsenal in Cross-Ange's canon story first, to specifically appear to them as a savior in their moment of death, by which to then offer his help in exchange for serving him, which gets him their loyalty, as their comrades couldn't do anything to help them in the moment of crisis, which was the point of him engineering that entire scenario. As I said, he gets off on the women he turns into his slaves worshipping him, as that is all it is about to him, being viewed as a god, and destroying everything that proves that such is not so. So for him to appear like this, in contradiction to the very character that Cross-Ange builds up about this monster, it is a sign of how badly X has done wrong by it, thanks to how it has used Cross-Ange's content in the same way Stupid Hair uses women, to only enable their other machinations. As all it takes in X to turn them is him just walking up to them, having a casual chat, and offering them a fucking job that makes them decide to become enemies. In X, the kids Ursula looks after haven't been murdered. Chris hasn't had moments with Embryo that endears her to him as a better friend than Hilda and Rosalie, who she thinks didn't care about and abandoned her. And Salia has not been repeatedly rejected or had her importance to her disregarded by Jill, who has a history of herself being one of Embryo's victims. Here, their personal doubts are revealed for the first time without them actually coming to pass. Stupid Hair swoops in, and now they work for him, without any evidence he even used his mental domination ability on any of them. Which is another thing he's shown to not rely on because he wants his slaves to worship him of their own accord, as a true god should not have to force people to worship him.
What is a god but a being that is worshipped by those beneath? Is great knowledge, power, understanding not enough for you to revere?
Like, I know some people that are of the opinion that both V and X do Cross-Ange's story better than Cross-Ange itself did, and it's for reasons like this that I cannot agree with X doing so. V is considered to achieve that solely because it killed the most caustic part of Cross-Ange's plot before it could gain any traction. So everything that follows after in V was better received without any major revision outside of the crossover amalgamations. X has not done that, when it had every opportunity to, including addressing the needless inter-character antagonism as it never even made the attempt. It is forgetting about Cross-Ange's content until they have to use it. It is not using what they do intelligently, and is done wrong by its characters as consequence. Some of that is fixed in DLC, but in broad stroke terms, it's here like so many of the others included in this one, as an afterthought because they needed some plot points from them for their story engine about the other amalgamated series to work, but not to tell or do right by its story. My guy and a few of the post-story series in this one have the same problem, but it's less harmful to them as their cast's characterization has been mostly maintained due to them being either episodic series where it's easier to swing their paradigm, or their character arcs have already concluded. And even then, it's doing wrong by a few of them that makes their inclusion not seem to matter. Case in point, when in all of this have I last brought up Shozama, despite how early he appeared in the plot? But that doesn't work as much with a serialized story that is still ongoing in this amalgamation, where adaptation of it has overlooked essential elements until the last minute, if it even remembers them to begin with, due to the exploitation of its ongoing story as a vehicle for other, less interesting content, that does not include focus on them as well. Now, this isn't the only SRW game where this is a problem either, and not just the bad ones. It's just better spotlight here because of how deeply it does contrast against V's use of this series. Usually the problem is found from the opposite view, of certain series acting intrusive to the focus on others. My go-to example on that being the SRW game's overuse of UC Gundam, as UC Gundam's inclusion shoves series that aren't compatible with it into a box that limits how well those series' stories can be told in the crossover plotline, or end up stealing the show from them like happened in V with the introductions of Full Metal Panic and Double Zeta in their storyline. Victory from Research tends to be the worst on that, due to how specifically that series has acted intrusively in conflict with other included stories. And none of them deserve that. Neither ones whose plots are screwed over, nor the ones that caused the problem to begin with. It is something that really should not be seen in the way it has been. Hell, the game makes the point for me on this, as Stupid Hair isn't even specifically there for those three in the first place, but instead decided to fuck with them as he's already here to take Nadia and the blue water, doing so by the simple statement of her being Nemo's daughter. Anj coming in to defend her as her ring told her to do so? So was her ring like a Mado ring from Garo and actually talks? Should we be looking to pay Hironobu Kageyama and Ai Orikasa more royalties than hiring Jam Project for the theme songs already do? No, in the SRW-X version of things, the bloodline rings for the families of the original Ragnamail pilots that acted as the basis for Stupid Hair's Designer Humanity were in this time based off of Stupid Hair getting chances to analyze the blue water gem before this. He just couldn't use it. And of course, this once again evokes the aforementioned chicken and egg paradox for the Cross-Anj backstory as X tells it, as Embryo used the Ragnamail pilots to lay waste to his original world, meaning he needed those control rings for their pilots as part of the multiple locks he placed on them to prevent their use against him, as the reason Anj is important in the first place is she's from the bloodline of one of the original pilots, so she unlocks the gene lock on the Vilkis. The rings interface with the Ragnamails to unlock their special abilities, such as the Vilkis' dimension jumping and hyper beam sword, and the true star song that is her family's legacy unlocks the Discord feather. All three are needed to get each Ragnamail to function to their true capabilities. Thus, you can't have Stupid Hair create the rings based on something else, when those rings need to exist before Stupid Hair could have possibly ever encountered another artifact to base them upon, as they have to predate both his and Atlantis' emigrations to Alworth. And furthermore, if he's analyzed and unlocked the blue water secrets on his own to create his own versions of it, then why the hell would he need Nadia's? It goes back to my point on his god complex. If he could do it, he would, just to prove he was superior. And if he can't, because he's that bad of a scientist, then he'd never admit it. Thus the assault on Arsenal finally begins, among the assaulting forces being dragons? Why the hell are there dragons on Gorgol and Stupid Hair's side on this? Ursha, Sally, and Chris is one thing, but Stupid Hair's mental domination trick only works on the descendants of his designer Humanity specifically, so that wouldn't work on dragons. And the physiology of the Aura-descendant dragons is too divergent in their dragon form for the mind control tech Gargoyle has to work on them. Made worse as this is where the Keepers come in, actually earlier in the respective point in the story than the space side had this. And the bottom line of their intervention here is that the Keepers of Order have chosen to side with Stupid Hair, which even Embryo says is ridiculously stupid of them. And all because the Keepers' actions have made it so the very soldiers of virtue they want to bring to this world to fight against oppressive forces they brought as well, have decided the Keepers are just as bad. So might as well side with the bad guys. With the indoctrinated members of the Order not able to see past their own noses due to any individual thoughts over morality going against doctrine. As they're repelled, Jill explains her history with Embryo with her suffering a more justified version of what Ursha, Chris, and Sally are going through now, and how difficult it can be to leave Embryo once he worms his way in due to how much of a master manipulator he is. Or rather, is supposed to be. As I've inferred, X isn't very good at showcasing that with his very strong-arm tactics. But regardless, they have a good idea of how to deal with him in the interim. And that is through using Anj's bait to pull them out into a circumstance they can control, due to Stupid Hair being obsessed specifically with courting Anj. However, we don't get back to that immediately, as Watru's plot pops up again, with the introduction of the Black Witch, Bibbidi Baba Debu. Yes? Seriously. And it turns out she has been looking after Todd since he was injured in one of the earlier battles, and brought back to her by Might Guy's Mifune, thus explaining why he's not been seen in a while, with his ego being harmed by how he needed assistance from this old crone, and despite her proximity to Dwokdar's forces, her condemnations of his foolishness really strike him to his core. When he leaves, however, so does another Bystandwell fairy, known as a Ferrario, who runs straight into Sho Zama as he and other members of the Knights are trying to do mental training to strengthen their focus, and help get Sho out of the fugu the game says he's been in for a while, but has not been presented as showcasing. Considering this entire exercise was being led by Suzaku, and his entire modus operandi is head empty, ignore the consequences, and everything I did was right, it was everyone else that was wrong, he's probably among the worst trainers they could have, as Sho's hangups are all about the consequences of his actions, and whether they were right towards other people. This Ferrario is named Silky Mao, who happens to be the reincarnation of the Ferrario who was originally responsible for summoning Sho and the other Aura battlers to Bystandwell, when she was tricked into doing so by Drake Luft. How she's an Alworth is anyone's guess, but she was captured because she is the guardian of another Aura machine, which she leads Sho to as Mifune shows up in his Shogun Robo to try and recapture her. And since his last appearance was before the Code Geass character showed up, Callan has to comment on how crude Mifune is with his weeaboo cultural appropriation, as he's actually an American who exalts samurai culture. And Callan herself has a lot to condemn about that, considering her history of being a half-Japanese woman that had to live through occupation by her world's America equivalent, and them scoffing and suppressing her culture of origin. And on top of that, Bushido-style ways of thought only making the situations they suffered under worse. That is, after all, why Suzaku's murder of his father that exacerbated the whole situation even happened to begin with, and why it was covered up. So to run into someone like Mifune is just really kinda creepy. Granted, that probably isn't helped that in Universe for Code Geass, there likely was a rich asshole noble that after Japan was turned into Area 11, they bought up the rights to Japan's actual innovations and manufacturing industries to sell such products as their own to a broader market. After all, it couldn't have just been the 6 houses of Kyoto that maintained all Japanese originating industries while under occupation. So the Japan originating knights from the world of revolution would have a larger reason to be offended by his act than those from the worlds of peace or war. Still, this offense prompts the Brave Express Corps to re-recruit their final member, Might Gunner, unlocking for Great Might Guy his perfect cannon once again. On the ground, however, Todd and Sho have another confrontation, with Todd trying to claim the Aura machine Silky is directing him to, and it's here that had the Dunbind content used in this game been better plotted and tied into things, I feel this would have hit harder. As his losses in Alworth have done nothing but cause Todd's hatred of Sho and his bullheaded zeal to defeat him to surge to their zenith once again. Sho trying to snap him out of it by saying he has zero issue with fighting Todd as many times as he would want so he can have his chances to win. But he doesn't want them to be to the death or when it could cause harm to others, as Todd keeps escalating it too. With it being Silky that purges Todd of this supernaturally originating malice to bring him to his senses. Todd leaves, allowing Sho to obtain the Aura machine Silky was protecting. The prototype for Dunbine, the Surbine. The Surbine, which was made into a high-grade Malakin in 2021, originates from the good sequel OVA for Dunbine, The Tale of Neo Bystandwell. In that story, Sho Zama's reincarnation of Shion Zama, yes, seriously, is captured alongside the princess of his country by the Black Knight Raban, who is seeking to obtain the legendary treasure of their kingdom, which is eventually revealed to be the Surbine, which Shion pilots to defeat Raban. And the reason why the Surbine popped up here is... I have no idea. I know why it does in SRW-T, though, as T actually includes the cast of the Neo Bystandwell OVA. My best guess for why it's here is to give Sho and Marvel another option of a mech for them to pilot, with an additional co-pilot to give them support skills. Or 3 in a single unit when Sho's the pilot. As the Surbine isn't a bad unit, it just doesn't have many attacks and has the same problem as the other Aura Battler mechs, in that I do not know how to raise the characters' aura levels to pull off their best attacks. Though the source of the malice that infested Todd is better contextualized, and how Bibbidi has mind-screwed a different group of aura battlers, which are used as the cannon fodder by which the Servine's power can be showcased, on top of dealing with Mifune and his forces.
犯罪者の集団が
サバインの力がすごい。
私は必ず戻ってくるぞ。
But as the battle wraps up, this stage also gives us the ultimate attack of the Might Gain team, that was not included in Super Robot Wars V. I have no idea why it wasn't, but this team attack is just plain badass.
勇者特急隊究極の合体を見せてやる。みんな合体だ。
了解。
勇者特急隊6体連結。行くぞ。6体連結攻撃。ジョイントドラゴンファイヤー。うわ
バカなこの将軍三船が。
What's even better about the SRW version of this attack is this is the ultimate version of it, as the original was a 5-train combination, not 6, since it's only in the SRW series where Black Gain survives. Though despite the upgrade available, Sho immediately switches back to the Billbine as his primary unit, as facing Todd when he's ready in this new unit wouldn't be sporting for him, and only end up making Todd's problems with him worse. But as it turns out, as the next stage begins, no, Bibbidi, despite mind-screwing other battlers, had not done so with Todd, as now that he's not consumed by his hate, he tries to make amends with the old woman. From his calmer interaction, Todd reflecting that Bibbidi's a lot like his mom, who at the end of Dunbind he was trying in his own way to protect, even if he went about it the wrong way. In recognition of his growth, Bibbidi gives him the Senko Bracer, the next of the relics of Mount Sokai Waltrue needs to retrieve, that can reinforce Todd's abilities, while Sho himself has been trained by the other knights enough to begin to enter a proper void state, where his own ego and issues aren't conflicting with his techniques. Though during this, Lelouch ends up putting his foot in his mouth unintentionally, as when Anj and Callan both want to try out this training method themselves to improve their skills, Lelouch comments that they both can already enter void states at will, so they never get distracted during combat by things that don't matter in the moment. At least when a rider isn't deliberately screwing them over, which they take as meaning they're unthinking airheads, when there's a difference between not thinking and not letting oneself get distracted. The latter is the mental flow needed for a void state. I bring this up as, well, Lelouch's dialogue here doesn't really imply what they take away from it or what Simon says in the conversation, that they're empty-headed, which in turn is what sets them off. Telling someone they don't need a mental cultivation exercise, I view as him telling them they're already smart and talented at what they're thinking of training in, not that they're idiots that wouldn't grasp such. Especially due to the fact that the times either have gotten tunnel vision or panicked in a battle can be counted on a single hand with digits to spare. As fighting in a void state, that's what Domon Kashu does to enter Burning Gundam's hyper mode. That's Goku's Ultra Instinct form. That's that flow state you enter when you're hyper-focused on task and blowing your productivity out of the water. Void states are a good thing. And had Seaman not said anything, I think they would have taken it as the compliment it was intended as. So this becomes another what the hell moment for this game, with his originally intended paramour and spiritual daughter being mad at Lelouch for no reason. Anyways, Todd sends his letter of challenge, ready to put this stage of his life behind him, win or lose. Preferably win. and not utilizing the cheat of the Senko Bracer to push Sho to his limits. Bibity intervening as the battle reaches its climax to insist he finally use it, which threatens to send him on a hyperform rampage. Sho stopping him by showing how to properly channel the highest tier of aura power without going insane, as the training he's put himself through has allowed him to expand his consciousness just enough to use the force and let it flow through him, instead of trying to hoard it all that causes the hyperform problem in the first place.
目を覚ませトッドわかるぞ全てが行けこれが俺のオーラ力だしまった今ならわかるオーラ力の意味が
The implication of the Bilbine's Aura Shoot animation is that a fully Aura-powered Bilbine can open the Aura Road to Bison well, transport itself and its opponent to that realm, make them collide like a meteor, and just abandon their opponent there before going home. It's all sorts of insane. And with Sho quoting a line he said to Todd when they first fought together at the beginning of Dunbine's story, Todd finally stands down and lets go of the last lingering bits of his resentment, and finally joins our side, tossing back the Senko Bracer to Bibity so we can get it back from her fair and square, which becomes the focus of the rest of the stage. But considering the Senko Bracer enhances its user's abilities, giving an enhancement artifact to a spellcaster that can conjure up enemies was probably a bad idea. As when we defeat her, it does backlash upon her, and it's only due to the intervention of Dunbine's Queen Celia in momentarily suppressing the power of Dwokdar's darkness, which Bibity was drawing upon to begin with, that she is not outright killed. And Celia could do this because she has proximity to Dwokdar as one of his prisoners. Though after this battle ends, a cutaway shows that all of said prisoners of Dwokdar are actually being used as tutors for Toro. Yeah, it turns out that was Goro's idea, as he has to justify doing that to Dwokdar himself in order to calm Toro's spirit after the psychological shock he suffered from learning his enemy is Wataru. Though even then, Dwokdar doesn't seem to really care about any of that, as the only ones among his prisoners he's given any attention to now are Nia and Marimeya, this being Marimeya's first appearance within the entire frickin' game. With this, the route split ends, and the Greater Knights team meet back up, and we have the introduction of a new character, or rather, a new returning character. That being Masaki Ando, pilot of the elemental Lord of the Wind, the Cybuster. Masaki and the Cybuster, which has a frustrating number of alternative romanizations, are among the first Super Robot Wars original characters for the franchise, them debuting in SRW-2 in December 1991. And ever since, Masaki has been a hugely popular character, him even getting his own SRW spin-off game series, referred to as the Maso Kishin games, which began in 1996, which in turn became the Super Robot Wars OG Saga supplemental series. There was that much fanfare for him alone that he alone created the vehicle for celebrating over time all of the original characters of the various games. Hell, this goes a step further. In 1999, the story of Cybuster was adapted into its own anime series that unfortunately has a bunch of inaccuracies with respect to the plot, and actually is a very frustrating watch, as most of the characters are kind of assholes, spending a large chunk of the series working for the villains, whose sole wish is to return to the world that the Cybuster originates from, Lagias. With the Cybuster being dispatched to Earth whenever an interdimensional gate is opened to investigate and stop whatever's opening those gates, as they are a danger to both of the worlds involved. The most fun you're likely to get out of it is with Masaki's counterparts, or, well, counterparts in the story. As in the Cybuster anime, Masaki's character is split into two different people, the actual protagonist of the story, Ken Ando, and the character Misaki, who is the one who starts out as the Cybuster's pilot before Ken eventually becomes the main user of the machine late in the series. And the reason why you might have fun with Ken despite them being kind of a jerk is Ken Ando is the first voice role ever recorded by voice actor Yuri Lowenthal. It tied with Horror Glory from Ravemaster for that credit. So yeah, between Ken, Simon, Suzaku, and Riddy Marcinis, Yuri has voiced 4 separate major characters that pilot giant robots in widely distinct series, plus his role as Baku Netsumaru in SD Gundam Force, and Glacius in Transformers RID as sentient robots atop that, and Barnaby Brooks in Tiger and Bunny if you want to include power armor in that as well. Not a lot of actors can claim that many mecha-adjacent credits, and 3 of them are present in SRW-X. However, Misaki's popularity has actually ended up being to his detriment, as the character keeps getting isekai'd into other Super Robot Wars games. Misaki has the highest number of recurring appearances in other games, and that even affects his own games. As Musou Kishin, of the 4 games in that subseries, the first canonically happens between his appearances in SRW 2 and 3. He then appears in SRW-EX, 4, Alpha, Alpha Gaiden, Original Generations 1 and 2, Dark Prison, The Moondwellers, OG Gaiden 2, OG Dark Prison, OG The Moondwellers, The Animation, Divine Wars and the Inspector, XT30, Operation Extend, Cross Omega, Shuffle Fight, Hero Senki Project Olympus, and another Century Episode R. That's 26 games and 3 anime series, not counting the adaptation of the original Cybuster storyline. And every reappearance, literally every single one, is considered canon to the character's personal story. The guy needs a vacation! Now, the frustrating thing about Misaki coming in here, well, it is actually supposed to occur as the 3rd stage in the game, but you only get access to it then if you pre-ordered Super Robot Wars X, which got you a DLC code which flagged his appearance far earlier to play a more active part in the story, which might have had a larger impact thanks to Misaki piloting a literal magic robot, and how that would play into Iori and Amri's own respective stories to possibly improve it. But that's not something I can confirm unless I want to spend literal days reviewing what public Let's Play footage of X is available on YouTube. And frankly, that isn't something I want to do. So much like happened in SRW-V with the Huckbin and Gungrust, what could have been a more major and essential character to events by which to provide a chance to really get appeal built for the character is so far delayed until after we've got recruited everyone but the special unlock condition cast members, which makes it more difficult to build that same connection for those new to the series to a legacy character, and especially with such a popular one at that.
こいつのパワーは桁違いだぜ。
マクスウェルコイル充電完了。全自動追尾セット OK。
これで終わりだ。コスモノバー。
And as you've been seeing from the footage of the fights, the Cybuster is actually really impressive as a unit even now, with just the sheer power it showcases. Really, I think half the reason Misaki's gotten as many appearances as he has is because he is voiced in Japanese by Hikaru Midorikawa. And as I have established before, Hikaru Midorikawa absolutely loves the SRW series, so of course he'd be happy to reprise a role for the game series he adores. Misaki's role here starts with him being attacked by a bunch of the Keeper's golems to try and bring him to heel, and that's basically it. Him being recruited by the gathered forces and then integrating into them simply, with him downplaying his awareness of several of the characters involved in this due to his frequent quips to alternate realities, which admittedly the game then forgets about. Next time, we're building up to a larger confrontation with the Keepers, as well as us reaching one of the reasons I even wanted to review this game in the first place, as what pops up in the next segment sure justifies itself better than a certain film I loathe.